Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about tail latency in Ethereum PBS hot pass, and more specifically about the cost of uncertainty around deadlines. My name is Sajida. I'm CPO at Optimum. I've been in the space in Web3 for 10 years now, almost 11, and for the last 4 years, mainly focused on PBS and MEV infra. I've been working around the merge at Consensus with several Ethereum client teams, and then at Block Native on relay and block building infrastructure. So let's dive in. So I want to start with a concrete example. Let's take Alex. He's a user. He wants to do a swap on Uniswap, and he just wants to swap 10 ETH. He first starts in the public mempool. He gets sandwiched, loses $200, probably not a good idea. Then he is wiser. He decides to use a protected RPC endpoint. His transaction lands in the private mempool of a builder. It gets simulated, but there's some contentious state. There is no clear path to inclusion, so it's held. But at the very last minute, the builder finds an opportunity to include this transaction in the bid, submit it to the relay, who then gets to the proposer. Unfortunately, it was 60 milliseconds too late. The proposer had already selected a bid for that slot. So in the end, what happens is Alex is going to be able to include his transaction, but now he has to wait for slot n+1 instead of slot n. And so this is how tail latency manifests in Ethereum hot pass. So what we have here are discrete jumps caused by invisible deadline that Alex and most users never knew about. When those deadlines are missed, users start seeing delays, they start paying higher fees, they do more retries, and they might conclude that Ethereum is slow, when the real cause is actually somewhere much deeper in the stack. So here's the thesis. Ethereum runs on hard deadlines. The network creates propagation variance around those deadlines. And because the market is built on top of the network, every participant has to adapt their strategy to that variance. It is this adaptation by builders, proposers, validators, users that produce the economic cost. So long-tail latency is just the symptom. The real cause is a market that is responding rationally to propagation variance. So this is something that we've been looking at with the Optimum team for quite a while. For context, Optimum is building a networking layer for Web3 based on RLNC. RNC stands for Random Linear Network Coding. It has been co-invented by the CEO and co-founder of Optimum, Muriel Médard, at MIT. RNC allows us to create a gossip protocol that delivers faster propagation, lower variance, and more uniform delivery across the network. We'll see some results later. So what is interesting here are 2 points. First one is, what is the actual economic value that you get from additional slot time in the PBS hot pass? Or another way to see it is, if latency decreases, how does that impact validator APR, network health, and protocol efficiency? The second one is, does lower propagation variance improve outcomes around deadlines? And if so, can we price it? So first, we'll take a look at the PBS hot pass. Who's doing what? So first of all, we have the transaction originator, Alex. He wants inclusion at an acceptable cost, and he wants predictability. The proposer wants to avoid missed slots and vanilla blocks. He wants to maximize bid value, and he needs 40% of the stake to see its block before the 4-second deadline. A tester needs to vote correctly before that deadline, or they will lose rewards. And builders, they want their bid to arrive in time with enough value to win the PBS auction. Relays, who are currently an actor in the PBS chain, want to forward payloads with minimum variance in the critical path. What they all have in common is that there is a brutal drop in their outcomes and the value they can get from the moment any deadline is missed. So it's not a gradual degradation, it's really a cliff. Ethereum does not reward averages, it rewards being on time. So we characterize it as a deadline-driven utility. One thing that is worth stating is that we cannot distinguish between a honest late block proposal from a proposer or just a solo staker that happens to be in Australia and because of latency is putting kind of late in the slot. And so because of that, it's neutral and is something that can impact any player in the Ethereum space. So an interesting distinction as well in the Ethereum protocol is that the rules reason in terms of stake reached rather than nodes reached. So the issue is that it's hard to model the stake reach because you don't know. One beacon node might be attached to a VC client that is connected to a set of keys that has 30,000 ETH, or it could be just 32 ETH. So the node count and the stake reach are not the same thing. So it's something to keep in mind when we talk about those percentiles. We use generally PAT as a proxy, meaning if your PAT in terms of latency is below the 4-second deadline, you have a high probability of having reached 40% of the stake before the deadline, which is enough to prevent a reorg of your block. So it's kind of a key metric for any proposer. So let's see what happens at the 4-second deadline. As you can see on this chart, once the PAT latency approaches that 4-second boundary, head vote accuracy of the whole network starts dropping. Head vote accuracy is actually a key metric in the consensus layer reward, and it turns out it is extremely sensitive to latency. So this is another reason why improving latency benefits head vote rewards across validators and improves network health. Now, looking at the execution layer was a bit different. We're interested in MEV rewards. So in this chart, what you see is that bid arrivals, as seen by the proposer during the slot, tend to increase as time goes by. So the origin is T0 of slot time. And as the slot progresses, the proposer has to make a choice and decide on the bid to select and to put on chain. When that happens, he signs a blinded block, sends it to the relay, full payload is aggregated, submitted to the peer-to-peer layer. So if we consider that Ethereum core business is the production and sale of block space, we would expect the market to clear on value rather than depend on delivery condition. But here what we see is that the proposer might not be able to see the best bid. He's not able to get the optimum bid. He's just able to get whatever is available when their cutoff is triggered. So what we've done is set it the sort of counterfactual here and seen what if you had 50 millisecond, 100 millisecond, 150 millisecond more, what would be the bid that you would be able to select looking at the bid traces? So here are some numbers. So how much is 150 millisecond worse? Well, on the MEV side that we just saw, in the sample that we considered, which is just 1 week, it was 16% higher bid value on average, with roughly 30% of all of those bids being above 30% of uplift. So that gives you an idea. In total, that amounted to 400K across all of the proposers for that period. So that is like weekly revenue that proposer collectively could have captured. On the APR side, we estimate that roughly 2% additional revenue could be unlocked, which amounts to 60 million combined across the top 5 operators. On the consensus side, if we look at head vote accuracy, we could reach 99.1%, which would be adding 2,000 ETH in annual network revenue, and filling the gap between current and ceiling by half. On the builder and searcher side, we have no data, but we think that the game could be even larger, because the idea being you have more time to look for opportunities, and so more time to leverage them. This is something that we actually like to study next, so if you're a builder or a searcher, reach out. Okay, so going back to what is the economical link here? The proposer clearly can capture extra value by each millisecond that passes. But the issue is that the longer it waits, the more there is risk. So the idea is wait longer and capture more MEV, or commit earlier and give your block more time to propagate safely. Every millisecond is a trade between value and certainty. So here it means that the PBS is not just an auction, it is an auction embedded in a consensus deadline. Another interesting point is the binary nature of the outcomes here. The second a hard deadline is missed, you get a hard penalty. So respect the 4-second deadline, you're included, you're rewarded. Miss it, you maybe are rewarded, you lose rewards. So this is a key distinction from a market perspective here, which is delay versus variance. If you arrive 100 milliseconds later, It is a known offset across the participant of the network. Supply chain can adjust for it. But variance is different. It means that sometimes you're early, sometimes you're late, and that uncertainty is what makes it hard to optimize for. And because of that, the rational response for the PBS actors is to hedge. So builders submit earlier, duplicate bid across multiple relays, proposer cutoff before the economic optimum. Transaction originators like Alex overpay to make sure they get included. And all of that creates an interesting feedback loop. All of those duplicate submission, earlier cutoffs, retries, load the system exactly where it's already under most pressure, near the deadline. It increases queuing and congestion, it's bad for the relays. It further increases the variance. And so in short, hedging amplifies the very uncertainty it's trying to mitigate. Another interesting point is variance also impacts the network as a whole. On this map, what you're seeing is, some regions are darker, some links are also thicker. That means there's more validator concentrated in those areas and that the latency is lower on those links. So what it shows is that there is a high concentration of actors around the Atlantic corridor. And this is not an infrastructure coincidence. Obviously, it's an economic response to what we've just described. The system rewards whoever can deliver reliably under uncertainty, not whoever produces the best block. Research has modeled here a liveness coefficient as well, and that coefficient is trending towards 1, meaning one region going down currently would threaten Ethereum liveness. So to recap, what we've seen so far is that propagation variance creates deadline uncertainty. Deadline uncertainty drives to hedging. Hedging shifts competition away from block value toward timing reliability. And timing reliability is not equally accessible in the current gossip layer of Ethereum, leading to more concentration, weaker price discovery, and ultimately lower market efficiency. So I think by now you're convinced that there is economical value behind delivery certainty. And so the next piece of the puzzle was being able to price it. We wrote this paper, which sets the foundation of a pricing model for latency. One of the key findings there is that latency supports higher price bounds than the current uncoded gossip layer because every chunk received is useful into decoding until the decoding completes. I don't know if I have time to get into how it works, but if you have any question later, I can take them. So the TLDR is you get strictly more value out of every bit that is transmitted under deadline pressure. So here are some concrete results. So we've implemented this. We have a protocol called MUM-P2P, who's implemented Latency in a gossip protocol. For several months now, we've been trying it with a couple, half a dozen node operators or partners, and we're planning to move to mainnet in the next couple of weeks. So what you can see here is both Hoodie, measurement, and mainnet. On both of them, we can see some alignment. MUM-P2P latency is around 60% lower than gossip sub. And what I find even most fascinating is that MUM-P2P has around 7 times lower variance than gossip sub, which is very relevant in the context that we just set. So this is a strong validation of what we've been working on, but also the fact that we're seeing the same results on testnet and mainnet gives us some confidence that this is what node operators are going to be able to expect. Zooming out, let's look at the Ethereum roadmap. So the P2P layer needs to be a priority for Ethereum. And the reason behind that is that every upgrade that we're doing to the protocol, and I put some example on the slides, are going to increase that pressure that we just described. If we look at PeerDAS, for example, because we have some data on that since it was already live, several studies by independent teams confirm that as the payload size increase, head vote accuracy, missed slot rates, attestation rates, all of that worsen. So I'll leave you with this image. The reality of Ethereum block space market is that everyone is racing a deadline that nobody can read, and in doing so, leaving value on the table and worsening the network health. I'm done. If there is any question, I'm glad to take them. Everything that I showed in terms of results, you can find in the blog post. There is the methodology, the samples that we used, and the data sources. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any question
from the assistants? Don't be shy.
Oh, I have an incentive. I brought some caps and T-shirts if you want some. So, any question? Come get yours.
So no questions, no caps.
Because there's T-shirts, so I can't, miss this opportunity. So first of all, thank you. This is so much, very, very insightful. My question is what's your view on two things? When we talk about delays when it comes to the block builder delaying their payload, I see this as a zero-sum game, right? Because if you did some delay and you included more transactions into your block, then the next builder will not be able to include those transactions. While on the propagation layer, if you, it's not a zero-sum game, because if you missed some attestation or you didn't perform well, then you have a penalty that got burned, right? So how do you see the difference between those two ways, and what are the the things that you focus more on?
I see. So what you're saying is there is basically a tension of one part of the players wanting to maybe delay things more, and the other part being impacted by that delay and assuming the cost.
Yes.
So I think people are going to behave rationally, and it really depends on the incentives. So right now, I would say the idea here is that if we improve the propagation performance, then the delay that exists today is going to be less on the validator side, because basically you're getting an extra budget of time to manage this uncertainty. Meaning, even if some people are playing more timing games, or if people are delaying, as an attester, because the propagation is faster, you're still going to be able to see the block in time and cast your vote. So we're hoping that overall the head vote accuracy for the network increases.
Understood. Thank you.
So we've been seeing on some of our chains that we run that there's some bad actors, and when it's a smaller chain, there's a lot of difficulty peering.
Sorry, as an operator, you mean?
Mm-hmm. In your updates to your how do you control for bad actors at the peer-to-peer layer, where basically what we're seeing is effectively nodes that are just sinks. They receive transactions, they act like they're part of the chain, but then they don't do anything with them. And then because it's a small chain, there's so many of them that the transactions don't ever actually land.
Right. So I don't know which chain you refer to. Maybe you can comment on that. I know at least on Ethereum, you would have a reputation score that will sort of impact how you connect in the mesh. So if a node is acting badly, that score would diminish and little by little sort of get excluded from the topology. So that is one way of handling that.
But are you doing anything special in your version of the peer-to-peer?
So, good question. There is two stages. Right now, the idea is that people can run flex nodes, which are the nodes implementing this protocol. And there is something that we call rugby that we're putting in there is going to make sure people are behaving in a honest way. And if not, they're going to get penalized. So this is how we handle it. We have visibility into what the node contribution is in the network. And if something is sort of not right, it triggers some consequences.
Thanks a lot. And I invite you to continue the discussion just after, if you have some questions.
Yes, and come take some swag. Thank you.